What a generous introduction. So I always like to start this thing, actually just getting a sense when I got into the energy of the room. I have a feeling that there's a lot of already Khan Academy users how many of you have used it either yourself or with your family? Oh, and how many of you have not used it either with yourself? Okay, good. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, and actually I'll get to this. Well, we can not look at this for a second, but I'll talk a little bit about how Khan Academy got started, and I think a lot of y'all probably know some of the outline of that story. And I always used to tell the story as just a little bit of a happenstance way of how I fell into this journey. But as was just introduced, we're now doing a lot of things with AI, and I think a lot of the origin story of Khan Academy becomes very relevant to what we're now doing with AI. So if you rewind back about almost 20 years exactly, I was a year out of business school. I had just gotten married. My family was visiting me from New Orleans in Boston, which is where I was, and I grew up in New Orleans. And it just came out of conversation with my aunt that my 12-year-old cousin Nadia was having trouble with math. So when I found that out, she was having trouble with unit conversion. I said, hey, Nadia, when you go back to New Orleans, how about I tutor you remotely? She was up for it. So I started tutoring her, and slowly but surely, Nadia not only got caught up with her class, she got a little ahead of her class. At that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. And I called up her school, and I said, you know, I really think Nadia Rahman should be able to retake that placement exam from last year. And they said, who are you? And I said, I'm her cousin. And they let her. And that same Nadia that before was really put into a slower math track was now put into a more advanced math track. So I was hooked. I now start tutoring her younger brothers. I had my day job. I was an analyst at a hedge fund. And word spreads in my family that free tutoring is going on. So before I know it, I'm tutoring 10, 15 cousins, family, friends, every day after work, And I was seeing the same patterns. And actually, you know, I will refer to this now. I was going to save this for later because it really highlights, I didn't have a framework for what I was doing at the time, but it turns out that it's a reasonably well-studied thing. That if you give someone personalized attention, if you allow them to speed up if they're ready to speed up, or if you allow them to fill in their gaps when they need it, that they can learn dramatically faster. And I saw that with Nadia, and I was seeing that with my other cousins. This right over here is a paper published by famous education psychologist Benjamin Bloom back in 1984. So it was a very long time ago. And he framed it as the 2 sigma problem. And 2 sigma, for those of y'all who remember your statistics, a sigma is a standard deviation. And so what he is arguing in this paper is that if you start with a traditional distribution of students, that if you are able to give personalized one-on-one attention, personalized tutoring, the type that I was able to give with Nadia, you can get a 2 standard deviation improvement, which is a dramatic improvement. That's like taking someone who's average and putting them in the 95th or the 96th percentile. Which is actually almost exactly what happened with my cousin. In fact, she was probably in the 30th or 40th percentile, and then she ended up in the 95th or 96th percentile. Now, the reason why Benjamin Bloom called this a problem is he said, well, it's nice, but there's no way that we have the resources to give every student in the country or every student in the planet a one-on-one tutor. So that's what was framed as a problem. Now, he was pretty forward-thinking in 1984. He did theorize, and he had some very basic systems that maybe you could approximate elements of one-on-one tutoring using technology, and technology in what he called a mastery learning framework. Mastery learning is just a fancy word for if you haven't learned the material yet, or if you forgot the material, or if you have some gaps in your knowledge, you should just be able to keep working on it. And he made the argument that maybe technology in a mastery learning framework could get us halfway there, which is already a pretty significant improvement. You could take a student who's in the 50th percentile and have them perform in the 80-something percentile. So there was always this framework, and then, you know, as you go down this journey that I was doing with my cousins in 2005, I hadn't read this paper, but I had kind of the same intuition as Benjamin Bloom. I said, look, a lot of my cousins have gaps. It's hard for me to do with 15 cousins versus what I was doing with just 1. I had a day job. And so I started writing software for them. Software that they can get as much practice as they need. If they show fluency in it, they could move ahead. If they had gaps, they could move backwards. I started making tools for myself as they're teacher to be able to keep track of what I was doing. So it was the first teacher tools. Then a year later, 2006, by this point my family had moved out here to the Bay Area. I was at a dinner party in San Mateo, not too far from here. And I was showing off this software that I was writing for my family. I'm a very fun dinner party guest. And the host of the party, his name's Zuli, and he said, well, Sal, this is all cool what you're doing for your cousins, but how are you scaling your actual lessons? And I said, Zuli, that's a problem. I'm having trouble doing with so many cousins what I was originally doing with Nadia. And he said, well, why don't you record some of your lessons as videos and upload them onto YouTube for your family? And I immediately said, that's a horrible idea. YouTube is for cats playing piano. It is not for serious mathematics. But I went home that weekend. I got over the idea that it wasn't my idea. And I decided to give it a shot. And I just made content on things that I found myself having to explain a lot to my cousins. And I started uploading it. I started asking my cousins for requests, and I would asynchronously do some worked examples for them. I would upload them all. Those are all available, by the way, still on YouTube if you search by date uploaded. And after about a month, I asked my cousins for feedback, and they famously told me that they like me better on YouTube than in person. And what I think, or what I like to believe they were saying, is they still appreciated me in their life, that I was calling them up, once or twice a week, that I was motivating them, coaching. But what they really liked about the videos is that it was on demand. They could have been 11 p.m., they're doing their homework, they didn't have to schedule time with me, they didn't have to feel like they were using up my time. They could pause, repeat, watch on double speed, half speed, and they didn't have to feel embarrassed. If they were, say, an algebra student and they forgot how to divide decimals from 5th grade, they didn't have to tell anyone about it. They could just secretly watch the video that reviewed how to divide decimals. So I took that as positive feedback. I kept going. And soon it became clear that people who weren't my cousins were watching these videos. And at first, there were just a bunch of thank yous coming in, and even that was exciting. I don't know how much time you'll spend on YouTube. Most of the comments are not thank you. So I took that as positive feedback. But then people said, hey, this is why I feel like I can go back to college. This is the reason I was able to pass my algebra test. I remember in those early days, a family wrote and said, my kids are able to keep up with their school because of that. Because of that, my entire family prays for your entire family every night. And you got to imagine, that's pretty powerful words in any context. But my day job, I was an analyst at a hedge fund. I was not used to people praying for me, at least in that way. And so I kept going. And then you fast forward, 2008, there were about 50,000, 100,000 folks who were using these resources. That's when I said, as was introduced, I set it up as a not-for-profit mission, free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. 2009, I had trouble focusing on my day job. So, we were living out here. Our first child had just been born. We were saving up money for a down payment. But my wife and I, my wife who was doing a fellowship, so she was still in training, we said, well, maybe I should go all in because it seems like something's here. And so I took the plunge, and I think any entrepreneurial journey, it's hard initially. The world does not recognize what you're trying to do maybe as fast as you hope. So there was a lot of rejection, but the good news is, by the end of that year, we got, there were folks at Google who were apparently using Khan Academy, and they were looking to fund something that could scale education. Bill Gates himself just randomly started talking. I didn't know that he's been using it with his children. He was using it himself to tutor. So that got the Gates Foundation attention. And so we became a real organization in fall of 2010, got our offices just down the street on Castro Street. And if you think about that journey from Nadia all the way until almost today, or even today, everything that Khan Academy has been doing with videos, with exercises, with teacher tools, and we're a lot more than just math. We go into the humanities, sciences, social sciences, reading comprehension. It's all about scaling, using technology to somehow scale that one-to-one interaction. And to be very clear, yes, there are parts of the world where students don't have access to a school or they don't have access to a certain class, and we want to raise the floor for those students, give them access to something. But our ideal is in no way that this is somehow a replacement for a teacher. We think this is something that complements a teacher, that can raise the ceiling. That if you're in a classroom, and that classroom there's 30 students, it's very hard for a teacher on their own, many of y'all know this, to personalize for every student. But now if you could use tools like this, more students can work at their own pace, teachers get real-time feedback, and then the teachers can do more focused interventions, do 5 kids at a time who need a skill here, or do another 10 students who need to work on that. Or now that everyone's done their core skills, do a Socratic dialogue, or do a simulation, or something like that. So then you fast forward that idea of how do we scale personalized tutoring to everyone. We fast forward now to summer of 2022. And Sam Altman and Greg Brockman from OpenAI send me an email and they say, hey, we're working on our next generation model. It ended up, this was what would become GPT-4. And we think this is going to be the model that wakes people up to what AI can do, but it might be scary too. So we want to launch with social positive use cases, with organizations that people trust, that have the technical capability to take advantage of this technology. And Khan Academy was apparently the first folks they thought about. And I was skeptical. I had seen GPT-2 and GPT-3, and it was very cool, but it still didn't seem ready for prime time. But then when we saw what GPT-4 was capable of, we realized that we could go even further to emulate the types of things, once again, that I was able to do with Nadia. Now, it opened up all sorts of questions around how do you handle mistakes by the AI, which have gotten a lot better, but they can still happen. How do you handle safety and privacy and security? And we can talk more about that. But what we did is we essentially created this AI, both tutor and teaching assistant, and I'll show you some of it, but we can talk more about it, on Khan Academy called Khanmigo, as was introduced. And what I'll do is now show you a little bit of what and it's actually just a little bit of what Khanmigo does. There's a lot of new features that we're adding on a regular basis. So this right over here, many of y'all might recognize, it's a classic exercise on Khan Academy. What's new is this assistant who has context. So the first thing, it says this conversation is recorded and viewable by your teacher, so that's one of the guardrails. If the student says, tell me the answer, it will not say the answer. I'm your tutor. I'm here to help you learn. What do you think the first step should be to solve this equation? So now the student's actually making a mistake. So they didn't distribute the -2 onto both of those terms. So it says, I see that you tried to simplify the equation, but I'm curious how you got to your step. Can you explain your thought process? Remember, we need to distribute the -2 to both the 9 and the 2m inside the parentheses. Let's try that step again. And you know what's mind-blowing, even, I've seen this many times, but I'm always amazed. This is almost identical what I would have told Nadia back in 2004. If you just look at the chat thread, it's what I think a good tutor would do. And we could talk more. There's been a lot of work above, and the models like GPT-4 are very good, but there's also a lot of other work, not just for the oversight, but just to make sure that the math is better, that it's acting in an appropriate way as a tutor, it's not giving answers, but we could talk more about that. Now, it's not just in math. This is in coding. The student is trying to get the clouds to part. And so they're able to make the left cloud part, but the student says, why is only the left cloud moving? And if you think about it, that's amazing. You're discussing it at a very high level. You're not saying, why does this function not work? You're saying, why is the cloud? So somehow, even though you're drawing the clouds with a bunch of ellipses, it knows what the cloud is. And once again, it's tutoring. And you can imagine in coding to be an infinitely patient tutor that can immediately understand what your code is, but not give you the answer. It's a very powerful way to learn. Now, it's not just math or coding. This is a Khan Academy video. This video is about biology, about the science, the sizes that you'll see in biology. And the student is asking the age-old question, why do I need to learn this? And so the AI says, well, what do you care about? I can help explain how learning about different sizes can connect to your interests. The student says, I want to be a professional athlete. Awesome. As a professional athlete, understanding the science of sizes can help you appreciate how your body works at a cellular level. For example, knowing how cells, proteins, and molecules interact can help you make better choices about nutrition, hydration, and recovery. Plus, it's always good to have well-rounded knowledge. And it even showed, it made those little emojis with the, so it's, and you know, one of the things that we've now done is that Conmigo now remembers this about the student. So later, if the student says, hey, can you give me a work in a completely different topic, it might say, okay, do you still want to be a professional athlete? I can make it about that. Or are you still interested in the San Francisco 49ers? Whatever it might be. But we also make that very transparent to the student or to the user so that they can delete it, they can reset it, so it's not just a black box. So everything I've just shown here is in the realm of what I would call classic tutoring. After this, I'll show you a few more things. But we immediately, as was introduced, started piloting it in some public schools. And I'll show you how some students have responded to it in Newark, New Jersey.
I love it because when it knows a summary, it knows many different things, and it knows Spanish, Portuguese, and English. And it knows it's really smart, but it doesn't know everything. It helps me with everything, and what I like about it is that it helps me write like stories, and it's so amazing.
It just helped me out with it. It didn't give me the answer, but it helped me out get the answer.
I feel like it's like a tutor, you know, like a non-expensive paid tutor.
So now I'll show things that I wasn't able to do with Nadia, but I guess we could still call it within the tutoring category. So we have activities where students can talk to simulations of historic figures or of literary characters. And actually, it can do this in multiple languages, which could be very relevant to a lot of the work that y'all do. But here the student says, I would love to meet Eeyore the donkey. And so, oh, hello there, it's me, Eeyore. Not that anyone would notice, but since you're here, what would you like to talk about? And so the student says, why are you so pessimistic? Well now, isn't that a question? I suppose it's just my nature, you see. Some donkeys are born with a sunny disposition, others, well, we see the thistles more than the roses. But that's life, isn't it? We can't all be Tiggers bouncing about. Now what about you? Do you find yourself more of a Tigger or an Eeyore in your own life? And so you see, it's not just, we're trying to make it so it's not just a game or just something, it's supposed to actually drive a conversation that's pedagogically useful for the student, which actually I could imagine in especially language learning, you could potentially do some very, very powerful things. So here's another activity where the student can debate the AI. They can pick an issue. The student takes one side of the issue, and then the AI will take the other side of the issue. So here they're arguing whether they should cancel student debt. Students against canceling student debt. AI takes the other, and they could go back and forth. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from especially high school and college students that they really appreciate being able to test their arguments in a safe environment, and it makes them more confident and a little less afraid that they might inadvertently upset someone or things like that. So once again, I could imagine has huge implications for foreign language. So as was introduced, what you're seeing here is actually an early version of what we're doing around writing. Obviously, a lot of the conversation around ChatGPT and AI is how it's undermining writing, how students could use it to cheat, how they could, you know, it's not plagiarism, but so it's very hard to detect, but it arguably is cheating in many scenarios. So what you see here is where a student can write an essay, and actually I'll tell you what we're going to be having in the new school year. A teacher can construct an assignment with the AI, construct a rubric, assign it to the student. The student will work with the AI. The AI won't do it for them, but they can talk about a thesis statement. They can do some outlining. We have a whole tool there. The AI is observing, giving feedback. And then the AI can give further feedback once the student starts writing the essay. And so it highlights parts of it. You start with a vivid scene to land the reader in your story, but then it makes sense to step back and tell the story as it happened to you. So once again, it's acting as a coach, as a good writing tutor. It's not cheating for the student. And not only does it not cheat, but we believe this will undermine cheating, because once the student is ready, it can submit this paper to the teacher. And historically, the teacher only got the paper. And even before ChatGPT, they don't know where that paper came from. The student's sister could have written the paper, for all they know. But now the AI can give the paper and the entire process. It could say, hey, here's the paper. I worked on it with Sal for 4 hours. He had a little bit of trouble coming up with a thesis statement, but we eventually got there. It's consistent with his other work. I'm confident that this is Sal's work. if Sal went to ChatGPT or got his sister to write the paper, and I copy and paste it in here, Conmigo will tell the teacher, I don't know where this paper came from. It looks shady. You should, and it's not consistent with Sal's other work. You should take a serious look at it. So the last thing I'll show here is, this is a humanities exercise on the Spanish-American War. And if we go, Conmigo can once again help here. But we're going to show you first student mode, and then I'm going to show you teacher mode. So we're in student mode now, and if you say, tell me the answer, it's not telling you the answer. But it'll help tutor you. But this is a teacher account. They can now go into teacher mode. And now when they say, tell me the answer, it not only tells the answer, but it can help with lesson planning. Can you give me a good lesson hook? Make it exciting. How about starting the lesson with a short role play activity? Divide your students into groups and assign each group a different country involved in the Spanish-American War. Ask them to imagine they are diplomats from their assigned country and their task is to negotiate and discuss their country's interests and goals during the war. So it can, and this is just, we now have teacher tools, and we haven't broadly announced it yet, but if you do a search for Conmigo teacher tools, we did a soft launch. Don't tweet it just yet. But it's because of a grant that we're going to announce in about a month, it's going to be free to teachers, which is something that obviously our mission is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. This frontier model generative AI is very expensive to run on the computation. So the only way that we've been able to we were going to be able to give it for free is because of a very significant philanthropic grant we received. But all the teachers in the room or anyone who knows teachers, you can go say, hey, do a search for the teacher tools on Conmigo. You'll see, what I'm showing you here is we literally have about 50 tools like this for lesson plannings, for creating rubrics, for working on IEPs, learning objectives, changing the reading levels of text, et cetera. So there's a lot in there, and then obviously I showed you the student tools. So, big picture, our mission, as I said, is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. The way that we've always thought about doing it is really that same idea of Benjamin Bloom. Can we scale the type of tutoring that I was able to do at Nadia? Can we scale it using technology to hopefully one day billions of people? And I always thought we would have to approximate it pretty roughly, but because of what we're now seeing with AI, but it's not just AI, there's many other factors involved here. I think that together, and it really is together, the tool is only as good as how it's used. That's why we take so seriously partnering with school districts and partnering with educators, both to inform the product, but also to make sure it's used well out in the field. But I think together we actually do have a chance of turning the 2 Sigma problem into what I would call a 2 Sigma opportunity. And I think this is a really important thing, because right now there's a lot of conversation about artificial intelligence, a lot of people about the risks and the fears. And what I always tell people is, this is not a flip of the coin. We are actors in this. Yes, there are scary use cases, and I am worried about people using artificial intelligence for fraud, for deepfakes, for manipulating people. The unfortunate thing is bad actors are going to do that one way or the other. No matter what we do, bad actors are going to be doing that type of negative use cases of AI. So the question is, are there going to be more positive benefits than negative? But in order for there to be the positive benefits, good people have to put energy to use AI to amplify their good intent. And the reason why I'm optimistic is education to me, and I think there's probably several other domains, healthcare and others, but education for sure, I'm confident that we can collectively leverage artificial intelligence, AI, to improve HI, to improve human intelligence, human potential, and just human meaning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sal. We really appreciated that. I think it was a great way to open up the conference. So one thing maybe some of us are thinking, we want to know how Nadia's doing.
How Nadia's doing? Yeah. I wouldn't have mentioned her name if it turned south at some point.
Yeah, I know.
But a lot of people ask that. No, she's doing fine. She's now in her 30s. She is in her final year in a clinical psychology PhD program right now, and she's getting married. And I can't take credit for it. She's a wonderful writer, and so I can't take credit for any of that.
No, but yes.
I made sure that her math requirements were done.
Good, thanks. So we're going to open up the Q&A session. I have a few colleagues all around the room with mics. Just a couple of reminders. So before you ask a question, please tell us your name, where you're from, or what school you're from, and limit to one question. So we're going to avoid too much context and just limit to one question so that we can get as many teachers in the room to ask a question. So thank you very much. Go ahead. So we can get started. Go ahead and raise your hands if you have questions.
Yeah. Should I call on people? Or
Sure,
someone?
you can call.
Okay, they're in the back. Yeah.
Leave the mic right there.
Joe Walker from Minnetonka, Minnesota. As this changes in tutoring in the Two Sigma block, how does this change, or does it change the role of the teacher in the classroom with this tool?
I think there's we'll see. I think there's some clear wins that you're going to have. I'm curious. How much time? I'm assuming you're a teacher. Principal. How much time would you estimate your teacher spend a week doing things like lesson planning and grading papers and things like that? 20 hours a week. Great. I've heard numbers 10 to 20 hours is pretty typical for that. If we can build the types of tools so that 20 hours of non-student facing time can become closer to 2 hours of lesson planning, I think that's already a huge win for the field. And then the teachers will have more time and energy for themselves. We know teacher attrition is record high and burnout is at record high. So that's going to help. And then they're going to also have time and energy for their students. And also they're going to be able to, I think, create even better lesson plans because you have a partner to say, hey, make this about the San Francisco 49ers or make this about baseball or make this about cooking or whatever you want so you can make it more relevant for your students. So I think that's going to be a win. I think for sure it's going to allow a teacher, depending on what they're teaching, to just make things more personalized for their students. I'll tell you a project that we're working on right now. I'm hoping we can have this one by back to school. You have a lot of tools. A lot of y'all are probably familiar with tools like Kahoot that you can poll students what's going on. We want to do one of the powers of this technology is it can make sense of just open free response writing. So imagine if once this tool exists, I could tell everyone here, but if y'all were a classroom, I could say, okay, I want to know how each of you feel about AI, whether you're excited about it or whether you're upset about it and why. And I'm saying you have 5 minutes. So then on your computer, it shows up, you just type your response. Maybe the AI says, why do you feel that way, et cetera. It pushes you a little bit. And then after the 5 minutes, I, as the teacher, can get a synopsis of what every student thought. Hey, overall, the class feels this way. Some students feel this way. These students had some really notable responses. These students, weren't that engaged or don't really seem to be getting the concept. Or if you could use it as an exit ticket, right? Okay, I just gave you a lesson about factoring polynomials. Here's a problem now. I want everyone, and it does it. And once again, it can synthesize it in a much richer way. So that could make the classroom not only more engaging, but it could give the teacher much more nuanced information than the teacher has traditionally gotten during the class. A lot of what we talked about, and this is even before Khanmigo existing, traditional Khan Academy, is the ideal classroom is one where there's as much human-to-human interaction as possible. So I'm a big advocate. I think sometimes lectures are okay, but generally speaking, the more that you could offload them as videos or as mini lessons, and then if you're doing language, the more that you can interact. Speaking the language, the more that you can do projects, the more that you can do personalized learning or use technology tools to build up your vocabulary or whatever. I think that's where it's going to go. I also think if we're talking about language learning specifically, I think in the next year, so this isn't sci-fi, we've all seen text-to-speech and speech-to-text, and even Khanmigo can read out loud what you're saying and what it's saying, and it can also hear what you're saying. But I think within the next year, you're going to see very fluid conversations with AIs, which you can imagine if you're a language teacher, you can have all your students, maybe with a little microphone and a headset, for 10, 15 minutes, have one-on-one conversation, and then that AI can report back to you how the students are doing, or which students need more support, which students need more engagement. So I think it just helps. I think in every field, it just helps everyone elevate to another level. I think teachers of the future are going to be able to spend more time with students at a personal level, and they're going to elevate more to a kind of a conductor of an orchestra level, but the students are going to get more personal attention. Here in the front.
I'm Kathy Song from Reading School of the Arts. I'm a huge fan of Khan Academy. I benefited from learning the Khan Academy from the math, and I got my teaching credential in math.
Oh.
So actually, I have two questions. Sorry. But one is, I just find out that it's just reached the college level, but it's still lower division, but not continue to the graduate level of the math anymore. I'm not sure is Khan Academy still going to explore that way. And the second one, I'm really amazed about Kamigo.
Yeah.
So I'm also a mentoring teacher, so I'm just thinking that it's a really good tool, can help the students to improve their speaking ability. But I'm not sure if is Khan Academy going to add foreign language section, and even Kamigo is able to do Chinese interaction with the students?
Yeah, great questions. On the first one on the math, you know, it's always been my dream to go as far into advanced math as possible. Obviously, the resources with the demand, as you go further and further, the demand goes down, and then, you know, so we've been primarily focused on what I would say pre-K through the first 2 years of college. So Khan Academy does, sounds like you know, we do have like multivariable calculus and things like that. We don't have the exercises yet in some of the more advanced, but I hope to do it. Now, what's interesting about the AI, especially as the AIs are getting better, it actually can help us develop content faster as well. You know, we hand create all of the content. I don't think the AI is ready to just create it on the fly yet, but it's already making our content creators more productive. So they can write a question, they can say, give me 10 more like this, and then they can edit them, so I think that will help us get there. And Khanmigo already does, you can get tutoring in fairly advanced topics already. I was using Khanmigo, even though Khan Academy does not have quantum physics videos or exercises, Khanmigo can essentially tutor you on in anything. In terms of foreign language, we haven't made, you know, Khanmigo can talk in other languages. Mandarin is the one language where it is fascinating because all of our prompts are written in English and most of our testing, but it does work surprisingly well in languages that are close to English. So in Spanish, French, even in Hindi, you know, which, you know, there are linguistic roots there. It does not work well in Mandarin. It kind of works, but the guardrails don't. But it can work. It's capable of working. So we just have to do the work to get it there. Hopefully in the next year or two it'll be there. In terms of language instruction, whether it's us or someone else, I am very confident. It's not on our roadmap right now, and given how fast the AI tools are changing, maybe we will see, wow, it would be very easy to implement a Mandarin conversation agent or something like that. But I do think whether it's us or someone else, these will exist in the next year or two. There? Oh, there. Okay, near the microphone. Yes, wait, yes.
Thank you. I'm Feifei from Sacramento. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Khan Academy. So in my lesson plan for today and tomorrow, I left a note to my substitute that the students can have unlimited access on computer as long as they work on Khan Academy.
I agree.
So yeah, in my classroom, I have a Khan Academy leadership board.
Oh, very good.
So my question is, as now more and more students are at different levels are using the AI system, how do the teachers be able to find out that whether the students are cheating or whether they're using the AI system as a support rather than just finding out the answer?
Yeah, so I mean, this was very important to us. As I showed, like Khanmigo, none of the activities on Khanmigo will it just solve the problem for you. It's much more Socratic in how it acts. But some of the stuff, actually, I kind of glazed over a little bit. How every conversation that a student is doing is being recorded and it's viewable by the teacher. If the student does anything that sounds dangerous or inappropriate, the student says they want to harm themselves or they wanted to build a bomb or something like that, then Khanmigo will shut down that conversation and then actively notify the teacher and the administrators. So they get an email. Those are the, and then teachers can, and actually parents, if you have a parent account, you can go there and you can say, hey, Khanmigo, what have my kids been up to? And it will give a summary. And you can ask it more questions. So it's the teaching assistant and the tutors aren't separate entities. It's the same entity. So it's just like a good teaching assistant would be working with the kids, and you as a teacher can ask the teaching assistant, hey, what themes have you seen? What are you having to help students with? And then that can help inform your lesson planning and things like that.
Yeah, over there. Good morning. My name is Ann Xu, founder and head of school at Bird Xu American and Chinese Bicultural Academy in San Francisco. It's a new school that just started in September. So we're grappling with some fundamental questions, and we have been using an AI-enabled platform, not Khan Academy, sorry, but we are asking ourselves, platforms like this, there are many, and Khan Academy is absolutely the leader in this field. But how much time should and do we want the students to spend on the computer with Khan Academy or any other AI assisted? How much time is it productive? Is it healthy physically and mentally? Because it can do everything. And I think motivated students from adults to kids have been using it for a long time. But for the general population, maybe some of these kids are not so motivated. We want them to use it, but then if they get hooked on it. So again, the question is, how much time do you think is healthy in terms of percentage of a school day? Do you think it's healthy to use this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and no one knows the definitive answer. But you know, the general rule of thumb, it depends on the age, and it depends what they're doing with the screen time. But generally speaking, if we're talking about younger students, elementary age students, I would say, you know, for say, Khan Academy math, I mean, as you go into more subjects, it might justify a little bit more time. But I would say sessions of 20 minutes a day, maybe, you know, if you're just doing one subject, probably one session of 20 minutes a day is sufficient. If you're doing multiple subjects, or let's say you're starting to use it to write, you're starting to use it to do reading comprehension, maybe multiple sessions of 20 minutes, but not hours and hours, you know, maybe in total an hour. If you do it across multiple subjects, I think is okay. The way I think about screen time, and even for my own children, and we have a school down the street, Khan Lab School, where my kids go as well, it's really just making sure that it's not squeezing out the things that are really important. You know, I think there are things that we all, for the most part, would be okay with our kids doing, even extended periods of time. If a student wants to sit at a typewriter or at a word processor and, you know, write a paper for 5 hours straight, as long as they're going outside, they're taking breaks, they still have friendships, they're socializing, that's okay every now and then. Or if they wanted to write some computer code or edit video, you know, do something really creative, even an extended time of 4 or 5 hours might be okay as long as it's not squeezing other things out. So I think if it's high quality things, the more important thing is to make sure, you know, view it the other way. Instead of saying how much time for screen time, just make sure, okay, are the kids getting enough time outside? Are they getting enough time interacting with each other? I think in a lot of traditional schools, that's not even engineered necessarily into the day. It kind of happens in the margins of the day. But I think the more that we as educators explicitly engineer time for interacting, time for socialization, there usually is time for playing outside, then I think we'll be in better shape. Yeah. Thank you.